Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 264 of the Tick Bootcamp podcast. The title of today's interview is Through Grief to Healing, an interview with Kim Director. My name is Richard Johannesson.
And I'm Matt Sabatello.
Folks, Kim Director is a well-known actor who you may have seen in Spike Lee movies such as He Got Game, Summer of Sam, She Hate Me, and Inside Man. Most recently, you may have seen her in HBO's The Deuce and in Orange is the New Black. Her success as an actor required her to learn how to grieve quickly. It is a life and profession filled with rejection and disappointment. The skill set she developed that allows her to sit with and process her grief and then get ready to read the next part has served her well on her Lyme disease journey. We urge you to learn this important pre-healing skill from Ms. Director so that you too can acknowledge your feelings of sadness and loss in a way that will propel you forward on your healing journey. Without further ado, we are really excited to introduce you to actor Kim Director. Hey, Kim Director, and welcome to the Tick Bootcamp podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.
So Kim, I want to share a fun fact with you and Matt Sabatello today. I am actually related to Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra is actually my grandmother's cousin, and his name was Old Blue Eyes. So I'm wondering whether or not you and I are related, because one of the most striking features that, of course, our folks are not going to be aware of because this is an audio-only podcast, is that you and Frank Sinatra have something very much in common. Can you share with us what that is?
People do sometimes call me Frank because I have these really light blue eyes.
So, and it is that you do have very striking blue eyes. So as it turns out, maybe we're related. Kim, what do you think?
Maybe that's why this feels so comfortable, perhaps.
Kim, talk to us a little bit about your career, just to give folks some context for you. I know you're a New York City gal, but you're also a pretty well-known actor, and you've been in some of the most iconic movies that certainly I have enjoyed. You've done a lot of work with Spike Lee and some other directors. Talk to us a little bit about some of the movies you've been in.
Gosh, well, thank you for that lovely introduction. Yes, I'm very lucky. I have worked with Spike Lee on many, many occasions, and I grew up loving his movies, and it was my dream to be in a Spike Lee movie one day. So meeting him my third day in New York was totally crazy because I didn't think it would happen that fast. But probably the most well-known movie I've done for him is a film called Inside Man, which is a really great film. And I also did his Netflix series called She's Gotta Have It, based on his first movie. I've also done the HBO series called The Deuce from David Simon and George Pelecanos, who did The Wire. And I did the sequel to the Blair Witch Project. So depending on what type of genre you're into, I've probably acted in it, I think, at this point. But just very grateful to still be a working actress at this point.
That is really cool. I mean, it is really cool, and you've had a really diverse career, right? I mean, you've sort of done every genre, and you've worked with some of the top actors in the industry. I saw recently on your Instagram that William Dafoe was in one of your Instagram shots. So talk to us about that.
Inside Man, that had the craziest cast ever, like nuts, like Jodie Foster and Clive Owen and Denzel and Chewie Tell. It was just, sometimes it's a little bit of madness when you look back on it, because when you're doing it, you're just doing your job. And then after the fact, it's like, oh my God, I really was in that thing with them. But
That is really cool. And it must have been really exciting for you, despite some of the challenges that we're all aware of about what happened at the Oscars. I mean, Spike Lee is a king maker and a queen maker, right? And one of the people that he made who, had some challenges in his life, and Spike Lee gave him a break, and now he was recognized with the top recognition at the Oscars. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Well, that's so interesting because it actually is the reason I'm a Spike Lee fan. I've never told this story before. My favorite film of Spike Lee's was Jungle Fever, because growing up in my family, I used to have a brother, he's no longer with us, but who was very heavily into addiction and drugs. And I remembered seeing, Samuel L. Jackson in Jungle Fever and seeing how crazy that family dynamic was. And honestly, that's what made me want to dream of working with Spike Lee. I just like I really didn't think it would happen, but really like it moved me. That film moved me so much that I just was pretty much obsessed with his films ever since.
And it's really cool that you've been able to sort of come full circle from being a fan based on a personal experience to now working with him on a number of different occasions. So let's talk about where you grew up. Let's talk about your background a little bit and where you grew up.
Okay, so I have a twin sister, and the two of us were adopted together, which is very hilarious because everybody in my family are just Jewish New Yorkers. And my twin and I are very Irish looking. I love my family. They're amazing. I was raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My dad is crazy smart, ran a bunch of universities, was electrical engineer, very bright. Nobody in my family had any artistic bone in their body, but my twin was an artist, and I started as a singer and then kind of transformed into an actress, I guess. So we were the only two creative ones, but my parents were very supportive of us. And my dream was to be an actress. I wanted to be an actress from a really young age. I was very hyper-focused. When I think of how I spent my years in high school, I'm amazed. I would go to high school, I would drive downtown, I would take 3 hours of dance classes, I would come back and do play rehearsal. Somehow I would do homework and do it all again the next day. I really I was very driven. That was my dream, and that's all I wanted.
So now you grew up in what is now considered one of the tick capitals of the world, in the state of Pennsylvania, right? Pennsylvania actually had a larger number of Lyme disease cases diagnosed last year than any other state in the US. We in New York were happy to hand that over to you folks in Pennsylvania. So I'm just wondering, during the course of the time that you were growing up in your academically enriched environment, did you know anything about ticks and tick diseases?
I knew absolutely nothing about ticks and tick diseases. I think the first time I ever heard of it, I believe there was an Oprah Winfrey episode about it. And I think that was following one of the documentaries. So maybe that's the only time I saw anything about it. And but everyone I saw was like in a wheelchair or barely able to speak. And another thing about me, I am allergic to sunlight. So I have not been in sunshine since I was a child. So I was always covered. And I still am, even though I live in New York, I look like a tourist all the time because I'm constantly in like a giant hat and like these jackets that all have sunscreen in them. So I wasn't a very outdoorsy person because I couldn't be. So I was pretty shocked that of all the people that would get Lyme disease, it would be me.
Well, and I think we should explore that a little bit more and maybe just sort of build out your background. But it's so you knew nothing about ticks and nothing about tick diseases, either from information that your parents shared with you, information that you would get from health classes in school. No one in your community had Lyme disease, where you would hear about people who were sick from Lyme disease. You knew nothing at all about Lyme.
I knew nothing at all. So
you're a gal who largely stays indoors. And during the course of your childhood, or after you became independent, did you have any pets, any companion animals, cats, dogs, any animals coming in and out of the house?
No, I'm going to sound like American Psycho. No, I had no living creature near me. No, I didn't have anything. And I was just like walking around New York in long sleeves. So like, I really was pretty shocked that I could possibly get bitten by a tick.
So if there's someone who would never get Lyme disease, you would think Kim Director would be that gal, but
I should be that girl for sure.
All right. So let's talk about your college experience. You went to one of the top colleges in the country, certainly one of the top colleges in the state of Pennsylvania. You're a Carnegie Mellon University grad. So talk to us about Carnegie Mellon and what inspired you to go there, and what degree did you graduate with?
Okay, so I went to Carnegie Mellon because I was a pretty accomplished singer and dancer. And Carnegie Mellon is the only school in the country that if you are a musical theater major, you also have to take all the acting classes that the acting majors have to take. So if you go to any other school in the country, like where the acting program, they might be learning dialects, you're going to be in singing class. So basically, I have a double major in acting and musical theater from Carnegie Mellon, and just because I was super intense and I wanted both.
Well, and of course you were supposed to have both, because although you started as a singer, it turns out that your aptitude was somewhere else.
Yeah.
And it was that experience at Carnegie Mellon where you were able to build out that aptitude, which ultimately resulted in you having this really cool career.
That's very funny. How do I say this? I think that Carnegie Mellon is a fabulous school. There's a bunch of incredible graduates. But I think the thing that all of those people have in common is they are so driven and dedicated. So I truly believe that like anyone that was a classmate of mine would have been successful no matter where they went, because I feel like that those are the types of people that were attracted to that program. Yeah, it's a pretty intense program. Like you're there kind of all day and all night.
Well, it's also an intense school, right? I mean,
Yeah.
for example, the entire robotics department is now working for Google with, the self-driving robotics program, right? I mean, it's a really, really special place, right? And, one of the things that I of course was wondering as a gal who graduated from a school like Carnegie Mellon, where they have some of the top programs, both in engineering and in acting, you would think that you would have, the opportunity to learn about, about your health and engineering your health and the environment and how to keep yourself safe from these diseases that are prevalent in the state of Pennsylvania, which is where you're going to school. So you learn anything about ticks or tick diseases when you're going to that great college you graduated from?
I knew absolutely nothing. And if you are an acting major, you pretty much do not take anything outside of your major starting freshman year. So I believe I took a semester of history and a semester of English, and that's all that's required. Literally it's 24/7, you're in acting and dancing and singing classes.
So now let's talk about your life after college.
I moved to New York. Right after college, I was lucky enough to book my first Spike Lee movie within, I don't know, a month of being there. And just crazy. But my early 20s was spent, I don't even know that I had time to breathe. I was acting, I was auditioning, I had at least 3 survival jobs because nobody was taking care of me financially. As you know, New York is super expensive. And I never had a day off. And I really had this workhorse mentality of like, okay, no, I can hustle and I can do this. I ended up in 2002, I was babysitting somebody, and I remember going into a clinic. It was like for a massage, but it was in a doctor's office. And I remember going for this massage, and the practitioner saying, "Oh no, there's a bite on the back of your thigh. I need the doctor to come in." The doctor comes in and she says, "Okay, you're going to have to go to your normal doctor before we're going to treat you." And I was like, "Treat me? I'm getting a massage. Like, what are you even talking about?" And I was like, "Look at me. I'm so white. I'm sure it's a spider bite. Like, I don't even go outdoors half the time." And they're like, "Nope, sorry. You got to go to your doctor." Sends me to my doctor. I say the whole story. And my doctor asks me, "Well, have you been to Connecticut?" "No." "Have you been to Long Island?" And I said, "No, I've walked through Central Park." And she's like, "Oh, then you're safe." And that was it. And never used the word tick, never used the word Lyme, never used the word bullseye rash, which apparently I had because it was clear to all of these medical professionals. And because not one of those words was ever used, I still was unaware of Lyme disease. And I had no idea when a few years later I started really getting sick that I had ever even been exposed to it.
So talk to us about when you started to get sick and what those early symptoms were.
Sure. So I started really getting sick in 2008. I had a huge weight gain I think I gained like 30 pounds in like 2 months, and nothing had changed in my diet or my exercise. It came out of nowhere. I had a handful of migraine headaches when I was younger, but I started getting very frequent migraine headaches. I also had about 6 to 8 years where I was in and out of a boot on my left foot. I kept breaking bones. I kept tearing ligaments and tendons. There was like a 6-month period where I wasn't supposed to walk because the breaks were so bad, which is really hard to do in New York City. And then if you rank it up to like 2016, it started to get insane. And when I say that, it's that so where my case is different than a lot of Lyme people is, I mean, I went undiagnosed for over 18 years. So my symptoms crept up so slowly. And each time a symptom came up, it was like, oh, there's something wrong with my foot. Well, guess what? I have a lot of doctors in my family. I had no problem going to doctors. I went to every specialist known to man, and nobody saw that anything was related. Everything was treated as a case-by-case basis with no through line. In 2016, I think was really when my extreme fatigue started, and my migraines progressed where I was getting them 15 to 20 times a month, and they were not responding to medication. And again, I'm hustling, so I'm still on set and teaching while this is all happening.
So let's build that out a little bit, right? Because generally there will be an immune disrupting event that will cause your disease to accelerate and take you to a very different place, meaning your immune system was managing these microbes for seems like at least 8 years. And I'm not entirely sure you weren't bitten as a child, because if you were having the migraines and you were having some of these symptoms as a child, maybe what was happening is that you got reinfected. But let's get past that for a second and focus on what were you doing at that time, right? You were burning the candle at, not both ends, 4,000 ends, and you're not resting, and you're not taking a break, and you're working a whole bunch of jobs. And so build that out for us. I mean, what type of rest were you getting, and what types of pressure were you putting your body under at that time?
That is so cute. Rest. What a funny word. Okay, I believe it started so I believe 2016 was the beginning of, it was 4 years where I was a regular on 2 TV series. I think I did 3 or, oh no, maybe it was like 4 or 5 films in that same time. I also did, I think, 3 other TV shows, like one-off. So I was working a lot. The other thing I was doing at the exact same time while I was shooting all of these jobs was, I'm a master Pilates instructor who's a chronic pain and injury specialist. I have been for a very, very long time. And I was still teaching clients 20 to 30 hours a week on top of these shooting schedules. And on top of these shooting schedules and teaching 20 to 30 hours a week, I'm also auditioning to try to get my next thing, which takes up a lot of time. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. And I'm also trying to look presentable as a woman in my industry, which also takes a minute as well. And at the same time, I'm rehabbing my foot. I'm in PT 3 times a week to get my foot better. I'm doing all of these things. And by the way, having migraines almost every day of this experience. So yeah, so I think my body finally, but really the incident that I think brought it all together, in 2018, I woke up in the middle of the night, and I don't know if you've seen the film, The Usual Suspects. Okay, great film. So Kevin Spacey has a very distinctive walk in The Usual Suspects. So I woke up in the middle of the night with burning pain, and I started walking like Kevin Spacey from The Usual Suspects. So I had a drop foot and a herniated disc that was so severe, and I spoke to a neurologist, and the second he saw my MRI, he's like, you need to get to the hospital tonight. I am operating tomorrow. And I still was in the case where I was like, well, I don't think you understand. Like, I'm a Pilates instructor, so I feel pretty confident I will be able to fix this. And that was amusing for him. He was just like, I really cannot debate this. You will be disfigured for the rest of your life if I do not do this operation. Like, this is no negotiation. So we do this operation. I had only had pain for a few days before this operation occurred. After surgery, I was under the impression that I would be walking normally. I was exactly the same. And so he said to me, I know you said you've only had pain for a few days. I need you to think back. This started over a year ago. And I know, because I know how much nerve damage has happened to you. And I remembered, you know what? He's right. A year ago, I started having all this lower back pain. But because I know how to rehab back pain better than anyone, I did every exercise I needed to do. And it just kind of masked how severely injured I was. And, I was just such a nonstop New Yorker. It was like, who takes a break? I'm not going to take a break. I got this.
So, like many genetically gifted people, you took for granted your health. You pushed it beyond any reasonable limit, and ultimately you crashed, right?
I sure did.
I can tell you that the people who are listening to this podcast, people who are regularly listening to this podcast, were wincing the way I was, because I could just see this coming, right? I mean, as you were describing the way you were living your life, and you were driven the way you were driven through college, high school, through college, through your early life as a New Yorker, eventually your body's going to give out. Eventually these microbes are going to take over, and it does, right? So when did you get, sick to the point where you couldn't drive yourself the way you were, and what doctors did that take you to?
Right. Well, I'm going to give you one little amazing tidbit that happened right before that turning point, which I thought was astounding. As I was in acupuncture, and I walked in, and my acupuncturist said, "Oh my God, what happened to you?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And she's like, "Kim, the whole left side of your face is completely dropped. Like, you have Bell's palsy. You need to get yourself to a neurologist now." Now, meanwhile, I've been through half the neurologists in New York City, and all of them have told me, "We have no idea what causes migraine. Let's try this medicine. Let's see what happens." They did an MRI, and they're like, "No, neurologically, you're great." But literally what this neurologist had said to me was, "Kim, it is really hard for women to age. I'm really sorry, but, sometimes women have a really hard time with it." I really found it totally incredible that every doctor I went to would basically say to me, "You look good, so we think you're fine." Like, that was basically every time I had anything. No one would believe that I was as tired as I was, because I was accomplishing as much as I was. And I was basically told, "Oh, well, when women get older, they get tired. What can we say?" For anyone who's been dismissed by their doctors out there, I just want you to know, it can really happen in an incredible fashion. But sorry, to get back to your question, the turning point for me was the very end of 2019. I had finished a job. It was a very stressful job. When I came back to New York City after shooting, I started noticing massive PTSD symptoms. I was afraid someone was breaking into my apartment. I lived in a secure doorman building. That was completely irrational and completely out of character for me. My fatigue was so bad that it would take at least 3 hours a day to get out of bed in the morning. And that was on a good day. My migraines were absolutely out of control. I still had a slight drop to my face. I had so much pain. My brain fog was so immense that I could no longer remember anything, which was really interesting for an actress, because that's actually one of the only things I have to do for my job. Sorry, I mean, to put it lightly, but that's really the baseline requirement, is that I can remember things. I think what really contributed to also was the fact that I was working in two professions where I can't be in a bad mood. So I was feeling all of these things, but to everyone around me, I had to be happy and good natured and easy to get along with, because there was no way I was going to continue going forward in either career if I was coming in being sick. In 2021, halfway through the year, and by the way, at this point, I've probably visited 80 different doctors in between New York and LA, checking out every single symptom. Finally, I was like, okay, forget it. I'm going to go to some fancy private doctor, some anti-aging hormone person that understands it. And just in my intake, Dr. Lionel Bassoon in New York City, after just an hour of talking about my symptoms, he's like, okay, well, let's take some blood, but I'm positive you have Lyme disease or you've got toxic mold poisoning, or maybe both. Let's see. And so we took a bunch of blood, and sure enough, 6 tests were negative and 1 was slightly positive. And he said immediately, all right, you need to go to a Lyme literate doctor. And I was like, no. I want to stay with you. You're the only competent doctor I've seen in 15 years. And he was like, nope, it's way too tricky and it's been in your system way too long. You're going to go to a Lyme specialist. So I did. And when I met with that specialist, I can see now that I was truly suicidal at that point, that I really had given up. I really did not, throughout the appointment, I think it was pretty clear to that doctor as well. Interesting thing, at the beginning of 2020, so I got COVID right at the beginning of 2020, which I think also set off a lot of this stuff as well. I got it pretty badly. Because I could not walk, because I couldn't do anything physically, I started this really deep meditation practice, and I started a lot of trauma therapy at the beginning of 2020. I also started a journal practice from Nicole Sachs, which is all about for people with chronic pain. And I urge people to look into it because it's something that is free and you have access to and can be really helpful for chronic pain. So I had been doing all that work for 1.5 years before I met this doctor. I go to the Lyme specialist and he said, well, you don't just have Lyme, you also have Babesia and Bartonella. And we're going to have to treat it one at a time. We're going to treat it with antibiotics and a bunch of other supplements and see how you do.
So Kim, let me ask you to pause there for a minute and walk back with me to your diagnosis and your pre-diagnosis window. I have a couple more questions to ask you before we explore your treatment.
Yeah.
So you said you saw about 80 different doctors for what was immediately obvious to the 81st doctor.
Correct.
During the course of the time that you treated with the 80 doctors, did anyone ever talk to you about Lyme or any tick diseases? Did it ever get on your radar?
At the end of 2019, when I was in Los Angeles working on something, I went to a homeopathic doctor. And from my symptoms, she said to me, well, you might have Lyme disease, but I'll be honest with you, it's really hard to find in any blood work if it's been in your system that long. And she's like, and it sounds like Lyme, but she's like, really, it's like impossible to test for. So that was the first time anyone used that word, but from how it was presented to me, it was presented as like, it's been in your system so long. We also, not only can we not find it, I don't think we can treat it. So I really didn't explore that avenue because it seemed like there was something I was not going to be able to address.
So Kim, just to reflect back on a couple of things, you had an experience with a massage therapist who sent you to a doctor who, if they had been properly trained and you had been properly alerted to this, you could have averted 18 years of pain.
Not only that, had they just said the word Lyme disease, in 2008, when I got sick, I would have had it in my consciousness that the next neurologist I saw, I could have said, I have no idea if this is related, but I do know that I did get bitten by this tick. What do you think? Like it really could, it could have changed my entire life in a profound way had I not been sick for 18 years, for sure.
So part of what happened with that experience was no one said anything to you about ticks. No one said anything to you about Lyme. No one said to you about tick diseases. So you just went on your way, right?
Yep.
But now you're meeting with a homeopathic doctor who is also aware of the possibility that you were suffering from Lyme disease. But the way this doctor described Lyme to you, you didn't think it was something that you needed to necessarily focus on, and that it wasn't necessarily something that would make a difference if you did focus on it. So you again had an opportunity for an earlier intervention and did nothing because of the way it was presented to you.
Yes, correct. It was presented as though we probably can't find it and we probably can't treat it. So let's focus on your adrenals or, whatever else to get me out of bed.
So other than the one doctor now, the homeopathic doctor, during this 80 doctor tour, did anyone else mention anything or ask you any questions about being bitten by a tick, or that were you in a tick endemic community, which, by the way, you grew up in one, but are you from the East Coast? I mean, nothing like that.
Nothing like that.
Okay. So now when you finally got your diagnosis, right? You finally meet a competent doctor who diagnoses you with Lyme disease, and of course is wise enough to refer you out to an expert on this. Did that doctor give you hope?
Yes.
And did that doctor put you in a position where you now understood that this is a very serious disease that could be treated if you were working with a properly trained and experienced practitioner?
Yes, this doctor, well, not only did he discover Lyme disease, which I will be forever grateful for, he also figured out everything else, which was my thyroid wasn't working. There were so many other hormone imbalances. There was a lot going on. And I had been dismissed by so many other doctors where they would look at one blood test instead of a full panel and say, nope, see, your numbers are totally healthy, like without having all the information. So I knew that at least I had somebody that understood that there was something definitely wrong, no matter how good I looked on the outside, that there was something very wrong with me. I gotta say, I did ask the Lyme specialist. I said, what is the ballpark of how long this will take? Because I already knew that it was going to take a while. And he said, well, conservatively, I would say you're probably looking at 9 months to a year of antibiotics to start. And, but really we'll have to kind of take it from there and see how you do.
So one of the things that blows me away, Kim, about this story, before we go more into your treatment, is the fact that all along you're living in New York City. And I just want to reemphasize, so you were told that you can't get Lyme disease in Central Park, correct?
Correct.
Blows my mind, right? So it just, I know I'm emphasizing a point that Rich already talked to you about, but the fact that you had a tick bite, you went to a doctor, and this all could have been avoided is so frustrating from my standpoint, because so many of us have been through that. And I think that's, with proper education, so many of our journeys could have been avoided. So I will digress with that point, but I'm just frustrated for you and had to share my frustration with our listeners. Well, so let's talk more about now you're treating with a specialist, you're going over your options, and now you have Lyme, Babesia, Bartonella. And did you have mold? Was there any indicators in your blood work that you had some mold exposure or mold toxicity?
I know that I had mold exposure because my former apartment did have mold in it, but it was not to an alarming rate on paper. And I've since moved. So I feel like that was hopefully okay. Fingers crossed. We'll see.
So now let's talk about, though, the treatment plan. You were touching on this, right? So what exactly did you walk away with after you got diagnosed with all these things and you first began to treat all of these tick-borne illnesses?
So the Lyme doctor expressed we would be killing off each disease one at a time. I was given a lot of supplements in addition to the antibiotics. The first thing I believe we were killing off is Babesia. I was on a medication called Coartem, a malaria pill that I got severely sick from. So the first 2 months of that treatment, I think I left my bed once in the first month. I mean, it really knocked me out. but I got a lot of help. I had a dear friend who put me in touch, and she would be a lovely podcast guest, I will say. This wonderful actress, playwright, television writer, screenwriter, Hallie Pfeiffer, who had been, and I had just seen a play that she wrote where her lead character had Lyme disease. And I loved her play. And again, like, didn't see any similarity, had no idea. And so my friend put us in touch, and she said, I have been struggling with Lyme for 8 years. I'm only now feeling better. Let me give you the Cliff Notes version of what's going to help you out. I was like, okay, I'm ready. And so she said, get yourself into an infrared sauna as soon as humanly possible. She said, you have to take so much time to sleep and to rest. She said, you have to say no to any person or situation that is going to drain your energy in any way whatsoever. And you have to get yourself a trauma therapist. And that, like, it's like, she was like, basically, like, this is a whole person disease. This isn't just, oh, this is a medical condition. Everything has to change. And so I took her advice, and it's New York City. So I found an infrared sauna 4 blocks from my apartment. And I went 5 to 7 days a week and I still do it. And I ended up having to also go through a detox process. So I have to do a lot of colonics. I do a lot of things for my gut health, although I don't know that that's really going to get that much better until I'm off of these antibiotics. But I will say this, that I think that the tenacity that I have and the drive I have as an actress to stay in this profession as long as I have is exactly why, I had 7 surgeons tell me I would never walk normally again after my back surgery. And I was like, really? You haven't met me yet. And guess what? I'm 100% recovered. So I feel like it's that mindset that I'm bringing to Lyme disease as well. And I'm only month 8 into my treatment, and I'm still, 65, 70% back to my normal self. And I know, like, we've only scratched the surface of it. So, like, I don't have a doubt in my mind. Like, I know I'm recovered.
Well, Kim, we do something called the Lyme Hackathon in May for Lyme Disease Awareness Month, which we are absolutely going to be asking you to participate in when this is over. And we had one hack in particular that we got from one of our past podcast guests that talked exactly about what you just described. And her hack was that never give up. And this whole term cure, people shy away from the term cure because can you ever fully get rid of all the bacteria from your body? And there's this whole, drama and conflict over that term. But her point was that if you lose hope and you don't keep fighting and you listen to these doctors, because she was told by almost 100 doctors she would never fully recover. But here she is today, fully recovered, living her life. So her Lyme hack, or her tip was, don't give up, don't lose hope. I don't care if 100 doctors tell you you're never going to get better. The 101st doctor can help you get there, right? And that's exactly what you're telling us, Kim. And I think that's a really important message that very few people, in fact, you're only the second person out of almost 270 people have shared with us. So I think that's a really powerful mindset piece and also just driving factor for us to never give up, because we can and will get better if we're determined enough to find something to help us. And we're all different. We're all not the same, right? So what do you think about that? Because I think that's a really common misconception many people suffering with tick-borne illness face, and they almost accept this false reality of, I will be sick forever.
I had a friend of mine who just mentioned something the other day to me, which I found so wonderful, which he had suffered from a car accident. He had this bad shoulder injury. And while he was recovering, his doctor had said something great, which was, if you find that anywhere during this process, you can feel pain-free or normal, and maybe it only lasts a half hour, that's really your body's way of letting you know it's trying to recalibrate to get back to normal. So even if 90% of your day is spent where you can't remember your own name, I could not remember my name. I had to tape up lines to audition with because I couldn't remember a thing. But if all of a sudden, it's 10% of your day, maybe if it's one day of the week, you can tell you are cognitively, physically, spiritually whole in yourself, it's possible. It's absolutely possible. And it's just like that sign that your body is giving you to let you know, yep, no, we're doing it. And I know it's probably taking a little longer than you'd like, but we're doing it. Like when we are working on this.
Kim, if you could just give us a quick picture of how sick you were, because seeing you and hearing you, I don't think people can appreciate the severity of how sick you were. So you just said I couldn't remember my name. And when you said that, I was like, no way, right? Because you're just so articulate right now. So you were bedbound, you could barely remember your name. It sounds like you had excruciating pain and migraines. So just give us an idea of how sick you were for context in this interview to see where you were and where you are now.
I mean, there was a good almost 2 years. When I say I did not get out of bed, I mean, I was able to, I couldn't walk around the block, that's for sure. I was able to get like to my kitchen or the bathroom in a very small New York City apartment, which is not a lot of steps. But I had no physical energy whatsoever. Cognitively, I was so impaired. I could not remember things. Even at times it was hard to speak, to really get my mouth to form words to talk. I was in so much pain. I was so sensitive to noise and light. Like any little bit of noise sent me reeling. But that was funny. You know, the noise sensitivity was another one that crept up. And I remembered it was probably in like 2018. It was after my back surgery. I remember saying something to one of my physical therapists. We were recovering my foot. And I remember saying to him, oh yeah, I can't go inside of a restaurant. It's too loud. And he said, wow, well, you know, that's not normal, right? Something else is happening. And I was like, oh, I don't, I think I'm just sensitive. And he is like, yeah, no. If you are telling me that you live in New York City and you've lived here a long time and you can't enter a restaurant because of noise, something is wrong. So all of these things that I dismissed every single symptom. I rationalized and dismissed every single symptom. And I chose to believe these doctors, but I mean, I knew I wasn't right. And I would tell them my symptoms, but just no one believed me. And I was always left with, what can I say? Women get tired and you look healthy. So, but yeah, it was terrible. I really didn't see how I was going to move forward.
I think Rich and I, you can probably sense, are getting extremely frustrated for you in the situation, because it's just, nobody should be treated that way. And here you are trying to get better, seeing over 80 doctors. And thank God you finally got a diagnosis, I guess, to be positive about this, because I believe there are many people out there today suffering probably for decades that have tick-borne illness like Lyme disease and don't even know it and may never know it, right? And that's the scary part when you think about that particular subset of the population that we don't even know about. But I want to, what's her name? Haley, your friend Haley Pfeiffer, was that her name?
Yeah.
Let's talk more about Haley, right? Because I wish I had a Haley when I first got sick. I mean, man, that advice she gave you was on point, right? So rest is key. And I really didn't appreciate this until we started Tick Boot Camp. You need to sleep. If you're not sleeping, you are not going to get better, right? And a lot of us have insomnia. So we need to find a way to sleep. And there's so many things we can do that are non-pharmaceutical. And if it has to be pharmaceutical, that's fine as well. But I think we almost accept the fact that we can't sleep. And that is a byproduct of a lot of the stuff that comes along with Lyme. But that was a really good tip that she gave you. But the one I really want to focus on with you is the say no to people that drain your energy, right? Because I don't think when you're healthy, you realize the impact those people have on you as a person, even if you're healthy. But when you're sick, it's a whole nother level of emotional and physical impact they have on you when people are negative and draining in your life. So Crystal Hefner, we interviewed her, spoke about the social detoxing process she had to go through. And I honestly, Kim, I talk about this all the time because I love that word, and I've done it in my own life. I've had to socially detox to optimize my healing ability in this journey. And it's something that has been so powerful for myself and others. So did you take Haley's advice at first? Did you start to, limit your exposure to these toxic people? Or was it like, I don't know if I really fully buy into that yet?
Actually, I loved that episode with Crystal Hefner. I thought it was fantastic. And I was like, God, that's so similar. Yes, I limited my exposure tremendously. But this is also, I've listened to quite a few of your episodes, and I do notice, I've noticed a similarity. And that there's a lot of very much like people pleasing overachievers, trauma survivors that end up with Lyme disease. And I think it's like those characteristics that can make us very successful in other aspects of our lives can make it really overwhelming as a patient, because we do want to say yes to everybody, and we do want to be there for people, and we don't want to be difficult, and we don't want to like have these boundaries with people. So I definitely am a very different person now than I was, let's say, the end of 2019. I feel like I keep my circle pretty small. I really pace myself, and and the thing which is so interesting is I remember asking Crystal Hefner about like, how did they take it? Like when you socially detox? Well, the truth is most people won't notice because most people are really focused on themselves. So it's actually not very hard to do. I didn't even think of it of who was I letting go of. I just thought, nope, who do I actually want to spend time with? That's what I'm attracted to. That's what I'm focusing on. I'm literally just focusing on the good. And to that end, I will also say I did do something, which is something I learned how to do as an actress a really long time ago, which an older actress gave me this advice years and years ago. And she said, like, whenever you get bad news, give yourself a grieving period. Like if you auditioned for this part 7 times and you don't get it and you're devastated, like give yourself 24 hours where you get to be really sad about it and you can feel sad. And then like the next day it's over. And so when it came to Lyme disease and realizing that like I had 15 years where I did not need to be in excruciating pain every day. Like I gave myself a week and I like let myself grieve like the life that could have been, and just decided to let it go and just, okay, this is where we are now. And you can just like step forward and it's like, all right, this is where we are. And like, I'm so grateful to be here.
Yeah, I really like your observation. And Rich and I have noted this as well, that it's the people pleasers in the Lyme community that seem to be more vulnerable and susceptible. I think because we tend to focus on others more than ourselves. And a lot of that, to get deep, maybe based off of trauma causing us to be people pleasers, right? So it's what causes what. But I think in the end, if you're a people pleaser, you're not giving yourself what it needs. You're not being in tune to your body, and you're not giving your body what it needs ultimately to heal. And then you're going to get sicker and sicker and sicker. And the part of being able to give this grieving period, I think, is brilliant also, because it's really hard, right? And I know people in this community. Rich and I spoken to thousands of people in the Lyme community over the past 2.5 years, and I can't tell you how many of them have harped on over and over and over. I mean, hours on support groups or on social media, just focusing on the fact that I'll never be who I was ever again. They cry and they can't get out of that. So I think you need to feel your feelings, because it's unhealthy to suppress your feelings. So what you're arguing, I think, is the best of both worlds. You need that grieving period. You have to feel the feelings, but then you have to move on and focus on healing and not dwell on those feelings of sadness because you lost who you were before Lyme disease. So I think it's a really good way to articulate it and to teach it to people that are listening to this podcast. So the next question I have for you, though, Kim, is let's talk more about the treatment, right? So you're focusing on Babesia treatment first. You're hitting it hard. You're really, really sick. You talk to Haley. You have all these things you're bringing into your routine. Were you able to have a better quality of life while treating Babesia because of the infrared sauna and because of being able to rest more and removing the negative people from your life, et cetera?
Yes, at the end of the 2nd month, and I had started hitting the sauna pretty hard and regularly, I started being able to walk again. Like I could actually like walk around New York. And as someone with a thyroid condition, walking is really, really helpful. It's also, I think it's like whenever, and as someone who's also, spent a very long time as a master Pilates instructor and rehab expert, New York City is a whole city full of people in this fight or flight. And so when I see people that are already in that state, then going for these super aggressive workouts, it kind of like my heart will skip a beat, because it's ultimately not going to be beneficial. I, because I've had to rehab myself from so many injuries, I figured out a whole plan. I can literally rehab anybody at this point. And to do it in a way that isn't high impact and isn't going to put your cortisol levels through the roof. And so I just started taking my own advice, and I basically started training myself like I was one of my clients. And by doing that little by little, it really has served me so well.
Kim, I want to explore that a little bit deeper with you, because we've heard from some of the leading Lyme doctors, like Dr. Biariscano, who was like literally the first Lyme literate doctor here in Long Island, New York. And we've heard from Dr. Rawls, and we've heard from Dr. Horowitz that if you don't move, you will not get better from Lyme disease. And movement doesn't have to be even starting off with a walk. It can be doing things like, like gentle yoga or Tai Chi, and then working up to walking, and then walking a little bit more. And then, but you have to move, right? So you just said that, I mean, this is your background. You were a master Pilates instructor. You knew how to help people rehab without increasing the cortisol. Talk to us about exactly what you did to start moving again and helping your body heal, so our listeners can learn from your knowledge and your training and your background to apply those things in their own lives.
Okay, so I am a big believer of each small change makes a huge difference, and each positive change that you're going to make for your health is going to motivate you to want to make another more positive change. So like if I've just sweat out in an infrared sauna and I've done a cold plunge and then I'm getting a colonic, am I going to want to eat like fast food afterwards? Nope, that doesn't really make much sense. So I usually would say whatever is the most agreeable kind of movement, that's where you start, because it's something that you'll actually do. So for most people, it's going to be walking, and walking is tremendous. Walking is so helpful. What I like to do for a lot of people is I give them a lot of mobility training. So it's not very taxing. It's not high impact, but it's to keep your range of motion full. And that's a great thing for as you're recovering from any injury. Because I mean, unfortunately, like you use it or lose it, like it came from somewhere. It's pretty true with your body.
So, there's so much gold here, and I think we could have a whole conversation on movement, but we may circle back to this. I think it's a really important topic there. So let's go back to Babesia. So how long were you on Babesia treatment for? You mentioned, was it a month?
I think it was 2 months.
2 months.
I believe it's 2 months of that, and then I went on to a different antibiotic after that.
And now you're starting to make a little bit of progress. You're moving again, which is great, right? And what was next? Was it Lyme and Bartonella together, or was it just Bartonella? What was the next step after that?
It was Lyme and Bartonella together, which is where we still are technically. Every day, it's interesting. I think that really what I credit a lot of my patients came from starting a really deep meditation practice at the beginning of 2020. And I do it every day for 45 minutes, and I really don't miss it. And it has certainly changed my anxiety and my outlook and my level of patience and my reactivity to situations. And honestly, once I gave myself that week to grieve, there's been no pressure about a timeline for me at all. That pressure has been taken off of me. Because you know what, like I was told that I was never going to walk normally again. Like I was told this thing was incurable. Well, guess what? Like absolutely not true. And I certainly was not going to mentally sign up to be a professional patient for the rest of my life. So like when I think of myself, if I visualize myself in my life, I am healed. I am 100% normal. I think your mind is like the biggest controller of so many things that happen through your body.
So I do notice one of the things you mentioned to us is that you recommend that Lyme people and Lyme patients get a therapist who can specialize in trauma, right? And we talked earlier about trauma. I believe there's a link between trauma and becoming a people pleaser. And I think, part of that is because trauma can put you into fight or flight, which then you fawn, which really fawning is becoming a people pleaser. And now you're stuck in fight or flight, you're fawning, and the combination together is really detrimental to your health because you're not focusing on your own health, you're focusing on others. And now you're stuck in fight or flight, which, from a nervous system standpoint is inhibiting you from healing as well. So what made you focus in on trauma? Was it Haley Pfeiffer? Who pointed you in that direction? and talk to us about how trauma therapy has helped you throughout your healing journey, and that the mindset you just said of time frame is not important. I'm feeling better. I know I'm going to get better, and this is life, right? I'm not going to be a lifelong patient here. It's like what role that'll play, and how was it connected?
When I started experiencing PTSD symptoms very severely at the end of 2019, I knew right then and there something is wrong and I'm going to have to look into this. So I didn't know, I knew that there was a problem, and that's when I started trauma therapy. It wasn't until, a year and a half later when Hallie got back in touch with me where I was like, oh, well then I guess this really came in handy that I already did this for the last year and a half. This is great. No, there was just thinking that somebody is breaking into your apartment is not a normal reaction. And I could recognize that. And I knew I wasn't crazy. And I knew I wasn't being overly sensitive. I knew that my brain was reacting to something. And that obviously I needed to speak to I had had a lot of therapy in my 20s. I kind of don't know why. I didn't really know who I was then. I don't know how beneficial it was for me then, but it was very different doing it now, present day, with some life experience. And, obviously my body was reacting pretty severely and it needed to be addressed. And when I say this about trauma, so I said I was adopted. I have a twin sister. How it worked when I was adopted in the state of Florida, you're put into like a home for the first 6 months of your life. So like you're in an orphanage, and like, it's great. I had my twin. I like to imagine we probably like slept next to each other or whatever, but it's like trauma isn't necessarily somebody has attacked you on the street. Like there are things in childhood that you might feel rejected by a parent. There might be things that you as an adult person think, oh, well, that wasn't such a big deal. I'm totally fine. Basically to go to a trauma therapist, I think, is to find like, what is the key thing that you keep sort of reliving and re-triggering and trying to heal that wound so that you can then go forward as a whole person.
And how does that trauma, whether it's something recent, that's minor, something significant, whether it's a childhood trauma, how does that prevent somebody from healing? Because a lot of people that we talk to don't realize the importance of trauma and how it inhibits their healing, right? So what role does that play? And from your Lyme doctor and your trauma therapist, how have they explained it to you that trauma itself can really be an integral part of preventing you from getting better?
Well, if you are stuck in a state of trauma, you are going to be reactive. So really, if you can resolve that trauma and you can learn how to bring peace, I mean, believe me, you're talking to somebody who had 17 jobs at once and didn't believe in taking a day off for decades. Okay, so for me to be like, yeah, I meditate every day for 45 minutes to an hour, like I'm not naturally that person. That isn't how I was wired, but I'm a much more calm and peaceful person because I've trained myself to do that. And so I can go through the world and I don't have to be reactive. And I don't have to be in like the house is on fire at all times. I get to really take a little time and notice what is important to focus on and what isn't. I think that when you are in a state of trauma and it is unresolved, it's going to play itself out in so many different parts of your life. And I really like, whether it's in your marriage or whether it's in your relationship with your kids or with your friends or at your job, I just think it's something that, unfortunately, Lyme disease, you don't get to just choose, like focus on the medical part of it. You have to focus on everything.
So let's circle back to the gut health topic, because you were talking about your gut health and, oh yeah, I don't know what I can do because I'm still on antibiotics right now. But one of the things that I've come to realize is you can do things while you're taking antibiotics to protect your gut health and lessen the damage the antibiotics are doing to your gut. So are you doing anything right now while on antibiotics to strengthen or protect your gut health and almost prevent this damage from happening or lessening this damage from happening?
I am. I'm on a bunch of different supplements. Please don't test me on them right now.
I want to know everyone, Kim. Come on, list them off.
But I'm on an awful lot of them. I ended up getting real, as I said, I'm very into the infrared sauna. I do cold therapy, whether it's cryo or cold plunge, or even like I would do a sauna and then walk without a coat through the streets of New York in the winter. Like I would, in any way possible, I would do it. But I've been on a very serious colonic regimen to help me to detox. And during about the last 2 months of it, I really wasn't eating a lot of food, like, because I was so sort of, my stomach was like not really receptive to eating a lot. But it actually helped immensely in detoxing, because we were able to get through stuff that's been there for a while, as opposed to just digesting current food. So I had done a lot of intermittent fasting, and then a lot of just like a bit of food restriction, but for detox purposes, not for weight loss or vanity purposes. And it's been incredibly helpful.
Well, it's really interesting. So in order to get to things that were sort of, I'll say, baked into your GI tract, right? Yeah. You're fasting, you're doing a colonic, and it's really cleaning you out at like almost the base level, right? And that's helping you detox a lot of this stuff that you've built up over your lifetime.
Yes, indeed.
So let's talk more about the cold therapy, because walking through New York City in the winter without a jacket, our listeners couldn't see my face, but I cringed. I mean, that sounds horrible, right? I mean, I would love,
after a sauna, it's divine. It's the best.
I mean, I would love to do all these, these cryotherapy I see people doing, but it just, to me, it sounds like torture. So for you, was it as hard as I am making it out to be? And what are the therapeutic benefits directly after doing, this cryotherapy?
Okay, it is not nearly, here's the thing. If you can deal with Lyme disease, you can deal with anything. All right. Lyme disease is so miserable. So you got everybody listening, give yourself way more credit than you think. No, really mentally just putting your mind to it and knowing that, because I'll say doing the hot and the cold, for me, the biggest benefit was the mental clarity. So there's a lot of benefits on cold therapy and what it can do with your neurotransmitters and helping for clear thinking. For the sauna part, I believe it was addressed to me that it was something that could actually penetrate your cells deeply enough to really kill infection. And so it's great for anyone with autoimmune issues. So the combo of the two of them have been unbelievably helpful for me. And honestly, I honestly don't know what's worked. I mean, to me, I feel like that's worked more than the medicine, but I'm not going to completely discredit antibiotics. But really, when I started upping that regimen is when I really started feeling relief.
All right. So you're walking out in New York City on a snowy day in a t-shirt and you come home. How do you feel? Is it an immediate benefit? Is it like, yes, oh my goodness, I need to go to bed and get 10 blankets on me? Like, walk us through what that's like and how you're feeling physically afterwards.
Physically afterwards, the greatest part is that for someone who was bedridden for 2 years, is I finally had energy and I finally would have my brain. So I felt like I was on top of the world. And then, a couple hours later, it's like, okay, now I can go to bed. And so as you become more consistent with these therapies, the longer the lifespan they have. So like, I know so many people now, like if they're building a home, they put in an infrared sauna, and I think, oh my God, how lucky are you? Like that you can just go downstairs and do this for 20, 30 minutes a day. Like it'll change your life for sure.
Let's talk about the sauna now too, in the same question, right? So when you're done with a sauna treatment, what is it like directly after? Because some people do have heat sensitivities, and they say that, if they go too long or too hot, especially when they first start out, they will have sensitivities, whether it's dizziness, whether it's symptom flare, inflammation, pain, etc. So what's your experience been with the sauna as far as adverse reactions? But once you got, settled in with it, what are the immediate after effects when you're done with the sauna treatment?
So when I first started using infrared sauna, I mean, I had fainted a few times, and I still suffer from dizziness, especially when like sitting up really quickly. So I definitely had a few moments of being a little dizzy, but you kind of like, how can I say this? It's the same thing as working out. Like you really just want to start off a little bit at a time, let your body feel safe. One of the reasons I had this whole other life as this, healing coach, and I really think is because like I knew how much pain I was in, and I knew how I wanted someone to talk to me, and I knew how I wanted someone to believe what I was telling them. And so any person that I would help got 100% of that support and attention from me. And I feel like that's half the battle of healing, is like, you know, if somebody's telling you you're crazy and this is all in your head, like, you're not really in a great space to heal. Like, as soon as someone can accept, like, right, this is really happening to you right now, I think it really opens the door to healing.
So I want to address one thing, because you mentioned in the beginning you fainted a few times after doing the sauna, right? And a lot of people.
Sorry,
Okay.
I did say, I was sorry, let me correct. I fainted a few times in my lifetime. I never fainted from doing the sauna ever.
Gotcha.
Just to clarify.
So there were, for you, there were never any severe adverse reactions to the sauna, or any, I mean, the dizziness, was that from the sauna, or was that just in general because of Lyme disease?
I think the dizziness is in general because of Lyme disease. I can honestly only think of the hundreds of saunas I've done. I think there's been 2 times where I was maybe a little dehydrated and I was like, ooh, I think I'm going to get out of here a little earlier today, because I could feel myself get a little dizzy, but it was never anything beyond that.
So now that you're in the current phase where you're treating the Lyme and Bartonella together, what do you know what antibiotics you're taking, or what combination of antibiotics? Do you have that, recollection? I
am on zithromycin right now, and then I'm on, oh God, is it Malarone, or it's a couple of other kind of nasty ones.
Is Malarone, is that the yellow?
Favorite, yeah.
Yeah, the yellow. So that's for Babesia, I believe, the Malarone, correct?
Yeah, yes, actually, yes.
And with Babesia, I have to ask, did you have night sweats, right? Because we touched on insomnia, and I never really got to drill into that with you. So I guess the first question regarding that is, did you have night sweats from Babesia? Because that can be disgusting. I've had them and they're horrible.
I absolutely had night sweats from Babesia. They were totally gross because, like, on top of it, it was also, there was so much anxiety around falling asleep. And I don't think that there's like, it's so, I think that there is an interesting part of the Lyme story that I do wonder if there aren't a lot more women in my category that get misdiagnosed with hormone issues when actually it's really cases of Lyme. Because pretty much every doctor I saw pretty much wanted to tell me that because I had spent a long time on birth control and I wasn't taking birth control anymore, it's just my hormones weren't working. And really it had nothing to do with it at all. It was all Lyme related. But it was just like, oh, I'm a woman, and then that's the one size fits all diagnosis.
So you mentioned the anxieties around sleeping. So what were your anxieties around sleeping? Because I think that's common, insomnia is common, anxiety is common. But for you, what were the thoughts you were having when you were leading up to going to sleep?
Okay, so at the end of 2019, when I started exhibiting PTSD symptoms, all of a sudden my internal clock shifted. I was someone who would usually go to bed between 9 and midnight, would wake up, pretty much around like 9, 8 or 9 in the morning. Like, actors' hours are a little different, but all of a sudden I was getting this jolt of energy at 10 p.m. and this adrenaline would not leave me until maybe 7 the next morning. And then I was exhausted. So I was kind of like the Walking Dead for a while. I had anxiety about falling asleep, about staying asleep. I had been on a lot of different sleep medications, but it was so heightened. And then having night sweats on top of it, again, every doctor just said, oh, this is hormones. This isn't anything else.
So when you start now with the Babesia treatment, were the night sweats worse while you were treating because it was actually killing the Babesia? And when or have they stopped at all, the night sweats so far for you?
Oh, the night sweats are totally done. They're totally finished.
Yay.
I have to say, the first month of treatment, I swear I remember as being a day, because I was so out of it and I literally couldn't leave my apartment. I was so ill. So, I mean, I guess that's like kind of the one good part. It's not like I have any bad memories of that recovery. I mean, I knew it was brutal, but like the first month, 2 months, like they were kind of nuts. After that, and I started this whole sauna and cold thing, everything really started looking up, and like my activity level, I could walk for 20 blocks. I could do things I hadn't been able to do in years.
So Kim, give us a timeline. You mentioned you were on you were on treatment for Babesia about 2 months, and now you're doing the Lyme and Bartonella. How long ago was it when you started the treatment for Babesia? So how long in total have you been treating for right now?
In total, I have been treated, I think I'm going into month 8. The truth is, I think I had, my first appointment with my Lyme doctor, I was literally suicidal. My second appointment, which I believe was 8 weeks later, I had made such a vast improvement, like that he had never seen in 40 years of treating patients, where he really could not believe that I could jump that quickly. And even my Lyme, I was like, I think it has something to do with this infrared sauna and this cold therapy. Just pretty dismissive. I was like, oh, well, it makes you feel better? Yeah, go for it. It's just like, so like, you can also be dismissed by your Lyme doctor, is all I'm here to say.
And I'm sure, Kim, you're like, I'm going to keep doing it, right?
Yeah.
So, are you comfortable sharing? I don't think you did share. Are you comfortable sharing the name of your Lyme doctor with our listeners? And is he located in New York City, or is she located in New York City?
I don't know if I made him sound really good just now. I don't know if you want to.
No, I mean, look, the fact that you said in 8 weeks you went from suicidal to feeling suicidal and homebound and almost bedbound to being, in a great state of mind and physically, I think that's a really powerful, testimony to both your doctor and you, though, Kim, right? Because you were doing things and making progress on your end and being guided by a good Lyme doctor,
Yes, I go to Dr. Raxland, who's based out of New Jersey, because as some people might not know, a lot of Lyme testing, I believe, it's not recognized in the state of New York. So a lot of Lyme doctors are based out of Connecticut and New Jersey for a lot of New Yorkers.
So and with Dr. Raxland, so you're doing a combination of antibiotics. She gave us those. You're doing
a bunch of supplements.
Bunch of supplements. Do you know any of the supplements that you're taking? Like, are there any that are like, wow, this is really powerful, and I want to share it with everybody that's listening right now?
God, I wish I could say that. But the only thing I can really say that about is meditation, hot and cold therapy, and getting rid of toxic people and situations. I truly feel like that has done most of the, and get a really great therapist. I mean, I'm on some broccoli sprouts, which are supposed to help. I mean, I don't know. I'm on basically every, I've listened to a lot of these episodes. They've all been named. I can't say that any, specific supplement has made me feel amazing. I do find that B12 shots have been really helpful for energy, but I think it's like they all go in combination with each other, truly.
So you've been at it now for about 8 months, and I guess the last 6 months or so have been specific to Lyme and Bartonella, correct?
Oh, I think so.
Or now is it a mix and match?
Mixes it up a little. I apologize.
No, but even if it's a mix and match, I mean, have you tested recently? I'm curious, where your numbers are, what your thoughts are as far as, what question. Levels you still have in you and, where you're at right now today.
Okay. So here's the thing that I don't know if it's discussed that much on this podcast. So a lot of these tests are not covered by insurance. And I work in an industry, one of my industries, which was hit very hard during COVID, where none of us were able to act for a very long time. And there were no programs in place. So just for the sheer expense of it, until I'm on my next fancy gig, like I don't even imagine that I would even consider testing again, just because like I don't really feel like I want to give $5,000 away to have the peace of mind of like, oh yeah, I'm healthy. Like I feel like I'm gonna know if I'm healthy or not. But that is a really tricky part of this, which is like everything and the things that I'm talking about, like hot and cold therapy, like again, unless you have a sauna in your house and you're going to run outside in the snow, like all of that stuff, you're going to be spending a heck of a lot of money to treat. So Lyme ends up being really expensive, which I feel like unless you've got really deep pockets, it can be a really challenging undertaking for a lot of people. That's why I guess if I could lead people to someplace, I really found that Nicole Sachs, who used to work with Dr. John Sarno, who wrote this very famous book called Healing Back Pain, has a whole journaling practice where you can do this and it really helps relieve chronic pain. So if you find yourself in a lot of pain, you can, for free, watch her YouTube videos and go to her channel and just 20 minutes a day do this free form journaling practice. And I found it to be really helpful.
So Kim, that was Nicole Sachs, who, and that her program is called Healing Back Pain. Is that what it was?
No, so she is off of Dr. John Sarno she studied with him. He wrote a really famous book called Healing Back Pain. Essentially, he wants to say that all back pain is just in your mind. I'm simplifying it a lot, but really what she is expressing is, no, I feel as though chronic pain is actually repressed emotions. So along with our talking about people pleasing and, trauma survivors, there's a lot of people that are people pleasers that are never going to express how they really feel. And so this is a way for free that you can get those feelings out of you, because maybe you're not in a place where you can afford a great therapist right now. So this is just like a free thing that you can do for anybody in the community that doesn't have deep pockets, because that's a reality for a lot of people.
So my final question before Rich picks back up is, looking back at the last 8 months of treatment and being diagnosed, and even before that, just intuitively what was going on. If you were walking down the street in New York City right after this podcast episode and somebody came up to you and said, hey, I just got diagnosed with Lyme disease, and you sparked up this conversation, what advice would you give them, to help them shortcut their healing journey that you wish you had when you first got diagnosed?
God, I was going to say something really nasty, like get rid of your family. No, I guess I would say, I think that Hallie Pfeiffer really, oh my God, shout out. I think really, I would say, yourself better than anyone. And it doesn't matter if somebody has a degree, and it doesn't matter if they're a specialist. If you know something is wrong, something is wrong. And, they say this to people who try to quit smoking, which is also like, how many times do I quit smoking until I can quit smoking? It's like as many times as it takes. And it's in the same principle of you don't see kids that don't know how to walk because their parents were just like, he's already tried 20 times. We're not trying again. No, every kid learns how to walk. So I feel it's the same way when it comes to your health. It's like, you're the boss. And if you're not getting answers and something is wrong, you just got to keep finding that right doctor that's going to give you the right answer.
So now let's talk about the beauty of this journey. What part of this journey would you not give back for anything? What did you learn about yourself? What superpowers did you discover? And how are you planning to use those superpowers to help other people who are on the journey?
Well, I mean, if you look at things like a butterfly effect, I guess I can't regret anything. I'm so grateful. I am so incredibly grateful. And if there's anything that I've learned is what a badass I am mentally to put up with this for so many years and to still come out of it being grateful and happy and healthy. And my body is stronger than it has ever been. And I really feel like I had no idea how mentally strong I was until getting really tested in this way.
So one of the things that I really enjoyed about the end of your conversation with Matt is you talked about the importance of husbanding resources and being really cautious about where you spend your money when you're on this journey. And then you talked about the things that were the most important to you on your healing journey, all of which seem to have been free, right? So you talked about hot and cold therapy, and at least the cold elements of your therapy were done for free because you were walking outside without a coat on. You talked about meditation. And of course, there are different tools that you could use to develop a meditation practice, many of which are free. Talked about social detoxing. And I really enjoyed the way you articulated social detoxing. And I heard the hint of the element where you were saying, well, with so many of these people, they wouldn't even know that they've been detoxed out of your life because they're so self-centered, they wouldn't even realize that they're out, right? So, that's one of the really cool, I think, observations you made. You talked about the journaling practice, the Nicole Sachs journaling practice, which was free. So, what you did is you went on this journey where you were taking responsibility for your own care. You were listening to your body signals. You were looking for doctors who would help you, but you moved on when a doctor wouldn't help you. At 80 of them over the course of some window of time, and you ultimately found a doctor that would help you, and you stayed with that doctor. But even that doctor is not the person that's causing you to heal. They're just giving you, or he's just giving you some frameworks in addition to all the other frameworks you've built for your healing. So does healing, I'd like you to reflect on that for a minute. Does healing from Lyme disease really have to be that expensive? Or do we allow our anxiety to rush us to a place where we're spending the most money on the people who are the stars in the community? And really what we could be doing is we could be building out tools the way you did that would be the most valuable, even though they're the least expensive.
Well, I will say this. I would love to be in the position where I could go and, get SOT or get, could the hive, all of these things sound incredibly appealing to me. I mean, I'm just being honest and realistic because I know that there's going to be a lot of listeners that will find themselves where they're like, wow, I don't have an extra $250,000 to throw at this Lyme disease. I mean, it's a real thing.
Yeah, but we've interviewed many wealthy people, many uber wealthy people, and they didn't get better any faster than the people who didn't have unlimited resources. And I think one of the things that we find the most concerning, for example, on this podcast is we have a group of people who often criticize us for not focusing on people with platforms, celebrities, for example, like you, who have a platform and could be a leader in the community. And, and one of the things we always argue to those folks is that, well, we don't know where these folks are in their journey, and they have to heal their way. And we certainly shouldn't be judging people who are celebrities. That we have to be understanding with them. But then when we do start to focus on celebrities, when we do start to focus on people who have unlimited resources, then the argument is, well, the only reason I'm not getting better is because I don't have unlimited resources, right? So we sort of, we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't when it comes to interviewing celebrities. And we're always really cautious about teasing out the right celebrities. Quite frankly, like you, we were making sure we were finding the right kind of people, so that yes, you are successful, yes, you are resourceful, yes, you have resources, but you're not Justin Bieber with billions of dollars available to you, right? So so I'm not sure that it's resources that are significant. It's resourcefulness that's significant. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really one of the things that you manifest. It's resourcefulness. And, you were talking about the thing, like you learned about yourself that you are gritty or you're tough, and yeah, you're those things, but you're also really resourceful. Right. And it's actually the resourcefulness that even before you got your diagnosis allowed you to maintain this really crazy lifestyle that actors have to maintain in order to be able to achieve the level of success that you did. It was resourcefulness, not money.
Oh, you're right. You're absolutely right. I guess what I would say is if you have all the money in the world, what I would do is instead of bringing it to some fancy doctor, I would invest in the therapies I just talked about, because those are going to be beneficial no matter what your health is. Do you know what I mean? So if you're dealing with a detox protocol, that's going to help you no matter what. If you're going to do hot and cold therapy, that is helping you out no matter what. If you're going to focus on your diet and make sure you're eating whole foods, that is going to help you no matter what. So I kind of would think because even those things, they do cost something. And it's like, we're in just a really interesting moment in time of the haves and the have-nots. And I know that it can feel really overwhelming if someone's like, well, I went to this clinic and it was, $100,000, but then I came back, I was fine. So I guess I can be your poster girl to be like, nope, you can live in crazy New York City and you can get better too. It can totally work.
We've actually interviewed a number of different people who have gone to these, gazillion-dollar clinics, and they did not come back healed. We actually interviewed Dr. Leo Shea, who's one of the top Lyme psychologists in the world. And what he argued during his podcast was that there's actually absolutely no evidence to support the conclusion that going to one of these high-priced clinics will have a greater impact on your healing journey than if you don't go. So I don't think the data supports the belief. It is the belief in the community that's driving, driving all of these expenses. I'm gonna share another thing with you. We had interviewed one of the star researchers, probably the star researcher in the Lyme community, and Matt was kind of fawning over him. We were kind of happy to have him on the podcast, and Matt was all happy about him. And Matt had said to him, "You're the star in the community," and he said, "Matt, don't call me that. Don't call me a star." Because the stars are the people who are hurting this community. They're the people who are limiting where we can research. They're the people who are limiting where inquiry can go. Everybody is looking to them, and what they're doing is they're setting these silos that are preventing us from doing the work that needs to be done. So don't call me a star, and be careful of the stars.
That's interesting. That's great. Earlier you asked me a question of what I would like to do going forward. I mean, I feel so grateful that I already have a whole other, dual career where I get to help people. And, I feel a bit like, the bionic woman. It's like I've had so many severe injuries that I was told I could never possibly heal from. And I love being a living example that you can heal from anything. Like, I really do believe if you put your mind and your energy and your focus to it, like, it can happen. And I think what I would also say is, like, believe it's possible. As silly as that sounds, but like, if you're in a mental state where you just can't even imagine, well, guess what? Like, you're not going to be able to imagine it, and your body's probably not going to follow suit. I think there's a lot of strength in, like, just closing your eyes for 10 minutes and visualizing, like, what would it be like to walk around in this world without pain? What would it be like to have the kind of life that you really dreamed of? I think that really your mind is the most important thing that you have.
Kim, when you were talking about that earlier, that also made me think about what you deserve, right? I mean, I think so many people don't believe they deserve to be healthy, to be cured, to be remitted. They just don't believe they deserve it. If they don't believe they deserve it, then they're not going to believe they can. If they don't think they can, then they will not be, right?
Yeah. So then I would say start with the most, oh my God, white girl, ridiculous piece of advice ever, which is like, start with like a gratitude journal at night. It's like, what you focus on grows. It's true. So like, if you can find 5 things in a day, and it can just be like, wow, I was able to walk to the kitchen today. Awesome. Like, it can be really small, but I do think that, like, keeping your, because I think that the culture of like toxic positivity, that's not going to be helpful, because that's basically what this journaling practice I was talking about is addressing, which is repressing your emotions. I don't mean that. I mean, like, have an outlet, whether it's with a therapist, with a friend, doing some kind of combat sport, like doing some kind of writing practice, whatever it is to get those emotions out of you. And then you focus on the stuff that's working out and the stuff that's really good. And I think you'll find that it really helps you get better just much, much quicker.
Talk to us about how that helps you to get better quicker. Is because you're identifying those things that you have, and then you're building on those, and that's how you ultimately get to the place where you feel like you deserve to be better, and you ultimately can envision the person that you want to become, or not the person, but the level of health you want to attain.
I would say yes to all. I believe that that's how, and I believe that when you focus on what's working for you, that is going to set your mindset up for focusing on the good, as opposed to when you are in chronic, like, crippling pain, when you are in so much pain where you can't see straight. And I should know, because I spent over a decade in New York. Every day of my life was that way. Everything was overwhelming. Like, oh my God, every time I step on my foot, it feels like a knife is stabbing me, and I've got to walk 6 blocks from the subway to get home. That was overwhelming. When you can start to shift in your brain the stuff that is working out, I find that it really preps you to be in a position to receive, which a lot of people do not feel that they are deserving of receiving anything good. And I think a lot of people can get into a position of being a professional patient and, like, sort of identify with that. And I just, at least for me, like, oh my goodness, I am so happy to not be sick. I'm like I know I'm not even fully healed yet. And I was like, no, I'm identifying with this totally healthy, vibrant version of Kim Director.
So Kim, you've been actually a pleasure to interview and a pleasure to talk with, and you are again, a real inspiration. And I want to ask you one more question, because we've taken over 2 hours of your time, and you've been very kind. If God forbid, the wonderful Haley Pfeiffer came into the room right after the podcast, and she was just such a powerful person on your journey, and she had a tick biting her on her arm, what would you recommend that she do so she wouldn't have to revisit her difficult Lyme disease journey?
Oh my God. I think it would just be like two women screaming and running over to Cedar Sinai, like at the exact same time, because I'm in Los Angeles right now. I mean, the part of it, this is actually the part that is so crazy to be on Lyme disease, is that, oh man, it's like early intervention does so much. A Lyme literate doctor can do so much. And I find it to be a real shame that it hasn't been a more public conversation, because it shouldn't have to be a terrifying thing. It should actually be kind of straightforward and like, here's this issue and this is how we're going to deal with it. I know plenty of people that were bitten by ticks, but they grew up in places like Connecticut and they knew to get treatment right away. And they were fine and never had any issue. And then I just look at somebody who was completely oblivious, like myself, and just like kept being told that, I was a woman and therefore I would feel crazy. I mean, it just is kind of wild to me. So I thank you very, very much for having this podcast and bringing such a great spotlight to this that so many people are suffering from.
And Kim, we can't thank you enough for sharing your beautiful story with the Tick Bootcamp community.
Thank you for listening to our Tick Bootcamp interview with our guest, Kim Director. To our listeners, we have a call to action. First, if you'd like to learn more about Kim, please visit her on Instagram at Miss Kim Director. Second, if you've enjoyed this episode of our Tick Bootcamp podcast, please share it with your friends on social media. Third, Tick Bootcamp has created a Tick Bite blueprint that has been inspired by the information that has been shared with us by past podcast guests. We urge you to visit our website at tickbootcamp.com to view our blueprint. Please note, we appreciate any input or improvements you'd like to share with us. Fourth, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify to get your automatic episode updates of our Tick Bootcamp podcast. And finally, we thank you, our community, for your comments on our past podcast episodes. Please take a minute to leave us an honest review on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, on social media, or on our website. We make it a point to read every single one of the reviews you share with us. If you're looking for a specific episode of our Tick Bootcamp podcast, whether it be a particular topic, a particular person, or a particular location, visit our website at tickbootcamp.com/search, and you'll be able to find exactly what you're looking for. Thank you, as always, for listening.